exciting world of land transactions and conveyancing in the UK. So, woo, exciting times ahead. And we thought we'd share a story. So this is the story of our little law tech startup called Easy. And I'm one of the co-founders. Hugo is going to speak to you in a moment. He's the other co-founder. And we came to this project by slightly different routes. Hugo's background is in technology, but he decided to move house last year. Now, I don't know if any of you in the room have gone through the conveyancing process in the UK. I think it's listed as the third most stressful at the moment after death and divorce. And I think Hugo will testify that his experience is pretty much up there. I conversely have spent the last 20 years sitting on the other side of the desk. I am a conveyancing solicitor, so don't hold it against me. I'm getting better every day. But to be perfectly frank, it's just as grim from the other side of the desk. The process is fundamentally broken. So we thought we could build an app, had a little tech startup that would help solve the problem. I mean, this is a big problem, right? So this is kind of one of my favourite little cartoons about the conveyancing space. A little pun on the whole piece around having to do property searches. But I can tell you this is a pretty accurate representation of my training problem as a training solicitor. The chap who trained me, this office did look pretty much like that. And we know the space is broken. So there's around about 1 million property transactions in the UK every year. A third of those fall through. And a lot of them fall through because of the glitches in the current system. That's costing the UK pushing around about £300 million a year in lost fees, and it takes on average 4 months to get from offer to completion, which in this day and age is just astonishing. So, as a startup, we thought, how are we going to fix this problem? And we obviously thought chatbot. What self-respecting startup doesn't have a chatbot? So this is ours. This is Buddy, who helps people through the home moving process. And actually, he's done a pretty good job, Buddy has. So off the back of this, we've been able to put some products out in the market, which put guarantees around the conveyancing process, which hadn't existed before. So we can guarantee that you'll be in your house within 6 weeks. 6 weeks is pretty embarrassing, actually. In this room, isn't it, saying 6 weeks is market leading, but actually it is in the legal space. However, we've got aspirations to do much more. We want to build AI into our tools to go to predict move dates. And we fundamentally want to get to 0-day conveyancing. We see that achieving that through having a lawyerless process. At this stage, we're kind of a bit unstuck as far as the current system, the regulation, the legislation that sits around it, is a barrier. It's a barrier to being able to achieve this. So it sent us really back to the drawing board in thinking about how are we going to change the conveyancing process in the UK. And just to put a bit more detail on what those problems look like in the legal space, in a nutshell, a little education on the conveyancing process for you here. It can be drilled down into 3 core areas. So we have data, gathering data up from various different places, then sticking some decisions around that data, and generally speaking that's done by the conveyancing solicitors at the moment. And then once the lawyers decided that the property is good and marketable, we then hang some transactions off the end of those, most of them financial, but 1 or 2 others as well. So just to drill down those into a bit more detail again. The data problem. Oh, okay, so just to clarify here as well, there's various different elements of law that we've been talking about today. We've been talking about how we facilitate smart contracts, and then if the smart contracts go wrong, how the lawyers then pick the pieces up and what elements they could be involved in the process. But we're kind of layering law on top of the law. So we're trying to fix a problem which is basically grounded in the legal world, which brings with it a whole group of other challenges and problems as well. But we're not talking about sweeping up when someone's fallen off the cliff. We're talking about the stuff that's at the top of the cliff. So the contracts that facilitate property transactions. And rather challengingly, the legal space is not known for being particularly adept at change. In fact, actively change averse, I think you can say. So we're relying on the lawyers to bring in and to be facilitating the types of change that we think needs to happen, and kind of never the twain shall meet. So when you talk about open source concepts to a bunch of lawyers, generally speaking, if you go out in cold sweat, it's fundamentally the opposite of what they're trained to do, which is all around client confidentiality and not sharing ideas. So we have 2 really different cultures that we're trying to push together here. So going back to the data problem. If you're moving house, in-house, conveyancing solicitors, part of their job, will probably spend around about 6 or 7 weeks gathering up data from a whole different load of sources. And again, this is a pretty accurate representation. Lots of it is sitting in planning cabinets in paper form, be that in the 200 local councils up and down the country, be it the land registry, be it at the water board. We even have piles of these sitting in people's attics. That's the scale of the problem, and it's an absolute logistical nightmare to pull it all together. But on top of that, we're also asking the wrong questions. Now, this is again something we've alluded to in the sessions this morning. Where do we draw the line and say, clean sheet of paper, what are the questions we should be asking? Now, what we have up on the screen here, you can see it, is actually a list of standard inquiries that are sent out today on property transactions in England and Wales. So just to read a couple of them out, for those of you in the cheap seats at the back if you can't read them. As a seller, you were asked if you're aware of any payment of corn rents. Just to clarify what that is, that's a rent paid in lieu of a tithe. So I'm not sure if any of you are currently paying tithe rents at all or aware of it, but this is a question that you will get asked if you sell your house. My particular favourite, I have to say, is the franchise rights. Again, helpfully clarified as a right to hold a fair. Now, I really like to have a right to hold a fair, I must admit, but in this day and age, is it really a question that we should be asking in every single transaction? Completely irrelevant. It goes back to the legacy system, which is common law in England and Wales, where we build on top of precedent after precedent to get to where we're at today. It actually bears no resemblance to how people are living in the properties at the moment. Next slide. Thank you. Now, this has led to more problems, what we describe as notional law. So, because the systems are no longer fit for purpose, in order to be able to facilitate transactions, lawyers are having to get quite creative and come up with workarounds, if you like, to fit in with the system. We've got a few examples up here, one of which is searches shelf life. So, as part of the conveyancing process, lawyers will commission searches. They are sent back from the local authority containing information like planning permissions, whether there's a footpath near property. And those search shelf lives, the legal community decided to have a shelf life of 6 months. So therefore, a lawyer can do it and rely on it for 6 months to complete the transaction within that time frame. Now, if you're the poor purchaser who happens to have a dual carriageway going through at month 4, it's tough luck. That's just the way of things. But unless we have the shelf life, because the data isn't real time and accessible, that's the workaround that lawyers have come up with, which again is just not fit for purpose. So we thought to ourselves, if only there was some way to replicate all this entirety of data in an online presence which is secure in real time. So I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have any ideas what that could possibly look like, but we're all ears. So that's a data problem. We then move on to the decisioning process. So how do you decide then whether you're going to proceed with the transaction? And at the moment, that decision rests with the lawyers. Now, this then leads us into another question, doesn't it, about what are the roles of lawyers today and what they're going to be in the future. And fundamentally, there's already been significant shifts there. So back in the day when I was a trainee solicitor, one of my roles was to kind of be the keeper of all the information. I had a big stack of legal books behind me. Someone would come and say, can I have a grazing agreement? And I would scurry up and get the book and open the right page, and there you can have the information. Well, that's gone. That's all that information is now freely available, and we can all access it whenever we want to. But then that leads on to further questions as to what the role of the lawyer should be. Now, at the moment, they are still doing the data gathering and being the keeper of the information, but they just haven't realised that the world has moved on. But they're also spending time being interpreters of that information and then hanging advice off the back of it. Now, when we talk about law, we're also talking about just loads and loads of different industries as well, and spaces, aren't we? This particular one, conveyancing transactions with residential properties, is not particularly complex. Working on the old 80-20 rule, the majority of transactions happen in exactly the same way, asking the same questions to get to the same answers. Lawyers are following checklists to get to this decision point. There is no reason at all why this cannot be moved into the online arena. Just to illustrate the point, this is actually a contract for sale we have up here for land in England and Wales. And don't get me wrong, there's 2 or 3 pages of small print that sits behind that, but that's standard wording. Very, very rarely gets changed. The only variables are on this front page, And the variables are things like the seller's name, the buyer's name, the purchase price, and the move date. All of which, you know, it's not rocket science really. We don't need a huge amount of programming to be able to facilitate getting this into the online arena. And actually, the incumbents have had a go at it. So VEO was the law society that started it to get residential transactions into kind of the smart contract arena for various reasons around funding and other things that the law society don't generally answer questions on. It didn't come to fruition. But actually, the one on the right-hand side is a bit more interesting. The Land Registry had a stab at this about 20 years ago. They came up with this idea of something called a chain matrix. And as you can hopefully see there's a whole heap of things that need to happen along the top. Down the side are all the parties in a chain of transactions, so multiple transactions. The idea being that when all the red crosses turn into green dots, an automatic exchange of contracts happened and legal ownership of the property would transfer. Fantastic idea, you know, if only someone could replicate that. Again, for various reasons, mostly on the fragmented nature of the legal industry, we still have 5,000 conveyancers all dabbling in this space at the moment. That didn't happen. But the exploration was clearly right. So finally, just to quickly talk about the transaction, and I think the main issue we have here is that as a home mover, the ecosystem is completely broken. So conveyance is just one part of this journey. You also have to sort out your removal company, your lender, your estate agent, your insurance company, and no one helps you to bring this all together. And it's all very much siloed. So to have some kind of facility whereby we can start to pull all this together, this really goes at building a much better consumer experience, but secondly, it's also going to stop this one-third fallout rate. So we know the current system is unfixable. We happen to think that the blockchain smart contracts has got to be part of the conversation today. And again, I think we've had various frustrations that industry meetings that are talking about this are talking 10, 15 years down the line. This is a conversation we need to have today because we cannot make any substantial changes to the current legal system unless we start to engage in this now. Of course, we've got the problem that then sits with that, is that how do we shoehorn all these wonderful ideas that we're talking about today into the current existing legal system? We think the answer is to create what we call parallel legal management. I mean, one example of that is the regulation that sits around conveyancing is we have something called reserved legal activities. What falls off the back of that is for signatures of deeds. At the moment, you still need a wet signature. And that's one example of the barrier at a statutory level that needs to change before we can properly facilitate online instant conveyancing. So we've got a three-pronged approach. The top one is to work within the existing parameters. So that's what we've been doing with the chatbot and Buddy, which we think can have an impact. Secondly, we need to start experimenting in parallel with the existing process to be having blockchain smart contracts mirror the process that's going on at the same time, allowing us to iterate and learn, but in the same environment. And then thirdly, we have this concept of what we call a beneficial ownership sandbox. So whilst the legal title remains as it would normally be, the beneficial ownership which sits behind the curtain, if you like, from a legal perspective there, means we can start to get really creative with how we are redefining the value of property and how that's transacted. I'm going to hand you over to Hugo now, who will explain a bit more thinking on that side.
Okay, I'm Hugo from Wardle. I'm aware that we haven't got very much time, so I'm going to try and nip through some of the points on how we're actually going to do this, and probably most interestingly, the focus on the actual. So the main problem is the data model that we have for property, and for a lot of assets actually we've talked about, from music that Imogen was speaking about, are completely broken. Data models across the ecosystem, they're not talking about the same asset. So we can't create any smart contracts because we talked before about any ambiguity being an issue in those contracts. At the moment, the Land Registry thinks of a two-dimensional plane, and actually lenders focus a lot more on the structure on that plane. So this is a flat that's on the third floor of a building. None of the data models have any representation of height above ground for us to actually be able to identify that specific asset. So if we can create a data model, this is my drawing of a property prism. So basically that's an actual representation of what we're talking about. The pipe underground is unowned space. The outline is the owned space, which is the outline of the land with the structures, and that's a tree with a tree preservation order on it. If you can break that down further, you can actually get to the level of granularity where you can start changing things like lending decisions. So things like what three words are a great question system that's global, that breaks things down into square, but we need to make that three-dimensional. We actually need to make it solar ready. We know that people are trying to go and inhabit the whole solar system. So if we try and start actually thinking about how we create a data structure that incorporates those two things, we at least have some way of talking about an asset that we're trying to create a smart contract around. If we're able to do that, and that part, to be honest, is again about trying to get the legacy organisations to put their data into that model. We can then build a layered application. And there's a lot of work going on looking at land registries, going and using the immutability of the blockchain, which is a great starting point, but it's actually right down at the base. I think that the need to actually be able to make actionable truth on the blockchain is something that Vinay pointed out to us. And the role of insurance, rather than the actual data. Right? The data that I just talked about in that model is a huge volume of data. It's never going to be able to be directly linked to the blockchain, but we can start to put insurance against that to actually create a model that can work at the scale and speed that we need it to. But we actually have blockchain, smart contracts, and tokenization as three different concepts that apply to different layers in this model. And particularly the using smart contracts and blockchain to change how the actual transactions are able to be dealt with both globally or on UK residential transactions means that we can actually start thinking about how tokenization can unlock the true value of property. As a startup guy, I have capital in my house right now that I can't access because of the way that that liquid asset is being treated in the current financial system. I've just been speaking to someone today who is thinking about how we can reduce the cost of lending and take that cost away from consumers. The economic impact of those two things is absolutely transformational. And the more we dig into all of this technology side of things, the actual specific technologies are not the hard part. It's everything around it, the systems that already exist in any business, which is around sources of capital, around liability in the whole ecosystem and where that liability is held, and how people offset that liability in their business models. Those are the things that are going to actually drive the adoption of these new models. So I'm very happy to kind of be able to share a model of how it can work. It's actually now that we realise we need to actually build a coalition business to be able to make this work in practice, because one of the differences between the sorts of innovations that a lot of organisations have been engaging in and this sort of innovation is the absolute need for open innovation and collaboration across ecosystems to really realise the benefit. So I just want to focus on one point, which is this, that when we look at tokenisation, we can really start to unlock the true value of property, right? If you go to the seaside and see a nice house that you think would be a good Airbnb property, at the moment, if you try to get everyone in this room to own that property, the cost of ownership and splitting up and actually managing that would make the whole proposition untenable. If we can lower the cost using these technologies down to make that cost negligible, it entirely changes the relationship that we can have with property. We can start to split out very clearly the ownership of property versus the occupancy of property. And I'm talking about residential property. The same applies to commercial property. If you look at one skyscraper, it's about £1 billion worth of ecosystem just in one of those structures. And actually the differences between residential and commercial start to disappear. And you start to have a completely new way of engaging with something that has been the core of the economy for a very long time, for a very good reason. So I'm very excited about the work we can do. If anyone else is interested in the property space specifically, this is an open effort. We do need to all work together, so do come and talk to myself or Sally. Cool, thank you very much. Thank you.